You dream of a wedding, a white dress, flowers, tears of joy. But 4,000 years ago, the first written marriage contract in history had no dress. It had no flowers. It had no tears of joy. It had two signatures, the signature of the bride's family and the signature of the groom's family. The bride herself was not present. The groom was not present. Marriage was not between two people. Marriage was between two families. And the wife and husband were merely clauses in a business contract. This seems cruel. It seems cold. It seems wrong. But this is marriage as civilization invented it. And to understand why, you must forget everything you know about marriage today. You must imagine a world without marriage. A world without inheritance laws. Without stable families. Without a system for ordering property. In that world, how do you know who inherits your land after you die? How do you guarantee that your children are actually your children? How do you prevent war between two rival families? Marriage was the answer to all these questions. Not as an emotional relationship, but as a legal system, as an economic tool, as a political weapon. Marriage was invented to solve problems that love had nothing to do with. In ancient Sumer, around 2100 BCE, the first written marriage law in history appeared. The law was clear. If a man married a woman with an official contract, a mahr is paid from the groom's family to the bride's family. If he married without a contract, no marriage. No rights, no inheritance. The contract is the marriage. Without a contract, you are merely two people living together. The contract is what transforms the relationship into a legal institution. And this principle, that marriage is a legal contract before it is a personal relationship, is still the foundation of marriage laws in every country on earth today. But what happened before this contract? Before the law, how did marriage work? Before the law, marriage was a verbal deal. A man comes to another man's house. He says, "I want your daughter." The father says, "How much will you pay?" The man pays cattle or grain or land. He takes the girl. That was the entire ceremony. No church, no temple, no celebration. A business deal completed in 5 minutes. But why does the man pay a price for the girl? Isn't this buying a person? This is a modern question. In the ancient world, everything has a price. Land has a price. Slaves have a price. And a wife has a price. Because a wife was a worker. She farmed. She cooked. She bore children. She raised livestock. She made clothes. The daughter was a complete productive asset. When the groom takes her from her father's house, he takes a worker. And the mahr was compensation to the father for losing this worker. But here comes the twist. The mahr was not just a purchase price. The mahr was also a safety guarantee. If the husband divorced her without cause, she keeps the mahr. If the husband died, the mahr becomes her source of income. If he mistreated her, the mahr is returned to her. The mahr was a retirement fund, insurance against poverty, an economic safety net in a world that had no other social protection for women. But this was not the only system. In some cultures, it was the bride's family that paid. This is called a dowry, and it has a completely different purpose. The dowry was an entry fee. The bride's family pays the groom because he provides a home and sustenance for their daughter. The dowry was living and educational expenses paid in advance. And in some societies, the dowry was the real reason behind female infanticide, because a poor girl's family cannot pay a dowry for her marriage. Mahr and dowry are two systems for the same purpose, transforming marriage into a financial transaction with rules and guarantees. But where is love in all this? Love was not present, not because the ancients did not feel love. Of course they felt it, but love was not a condition for marriage. It was not even a factor in choosing a husband or wife. The family chooses. The father decides. Interests determine. Love was a luxury irrelevant to survival, and in fact, love was considered dangerous. If you married for love, you chose with your emotions, not your mind. You might choose a poor person, or someone from a weak family, or someone who owns no land. Love weakens the family. Love destroys alliances. Love threatens the entire economic system. Therefore, most ancient societies treated love as a disease to be cured, not as a foundation for building a life. But marriage was not just about money. It was also about power. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs married their sisters. Not because they loved them, because this keeps power within the royal family. If a pharaoh married a foreign princess, her children would be half foreign. Half the power would go to another family. But if he married his sister, the bloodline is fully royal. The power is pure. This seems disgusting today. But in a world where power equaled life and death, incest was a survival calculation, not lust, and in Rome, marriage was an open political tool. Emperors married their daughters to military allies. Senators married their children to other senators' children to expand their influence networks. Nearly every marriage in Rome was a political deal. And the Romans were not ashamed of this. They wrote marriage terms publicly. Who pays what? Who inherits what? What happens in divorce? Roman marriage was a treaty between microstates, and every family was a microstate. Then there is polygamy. 80% of ancient societies allowed a man to marry more than one woman. Why? Not because men were more lustful, because women died at terrifying rates. In childbirth, in pregnancy, from disease. 1 woman in 4 died before age 40. In a world where half of all children die before age 5, every family needed the largest possible number of children to survive. Polygamy was a demographic insurance system, not sexual luxury, but polygamy created a problem. If every wealthy man marries 4 women, 3 poor men will remain without a wife. These men become dangerous. Young men without families are fuel for wars and revolts. Therefore, most societies that allowed polygamy were steeply hierarchical. A tiny elite hoards wealth and women, while the majority lives on the edge of starvation and rage. But how did all this change? When did love actually enter marriage? The shift began in Europe in the 18th century. Philosophers like Rousseau began saying that marriage without love is a void marriage. Romantic novels started appearing. People began reading love stories and dreaming of them. And slowly, the idea that marriage should be built on love began to spread. But this shift was catastrophic in ways no one predicted. When love entered marriage, divorce entered too. Because love ends, feelings change, people change. If marriage is built on love, and love is no longer present, what justifies the marriage? In societies that linked marriage to love, divorce rates rose to levels humanity had not seen in 5,000 years. Today, in countries that embrace love marriage, 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce. In countries where marriage is still a family arrangement, the rate is below 5%. Does this mean ancient marriage was better? No, ancient marriage was better for the economic system. But it was catastrophic for individuals, especially women who did not choose their husbands and could not leave them. Modern marriage is better for individuals, but it weakens the family system. This is the paradox. Every improvement in individual freedom weakens institutional stability. And the question no one asks is, if marriage was invented to solve economic problems that no longer exist, inheritance of agricultural land, alliances between ruling families, guaranteeing a bloodline for an heir, what is the purpose of marriage today? Marriage was invented by humans, and humans can abolish it. Every tradition you start, you can end. But before you decide, ask yourself, does marriage today still serve its ancient purpose? Or has it become merely a ritual we follow because our parents followed it? Marriage is not a law of nature, not an instinct, not destiny. Marriage is an invention, like the wheel, like writing, like money. And every human invention has a start date, and perhaps also an end date.